Hey there, Bear Club! At the Mama Bear Initiative, we explore how to protect ourselves so we can protect our cubs, the people who depend on us. Join us and get the confidence you need to stay safe, make good choices, and protect yourself and those you care about. Let's go!
Hey there, Bear Club. Welcome to this episode of the Mama Bear Initiative podcast. For our first episode, we are diving straight into the deep end of the pool. We discuss what it means to have value and how that affects the desire to protect yourself and those around you. So get your nose plugs and swim goggles, and let's dive in. So we're going to be talking about value and worth today as human beings. What we're going to discuss is what makes a human valuable, and is that human worth protecting? Or even more personally, am I worth protecting? So I think we think other people are worth protecting, but do we think that about ourselves?
Right.
So when I think of value for myself, I struggle quite a bit. I was taught early on my only value to my parents and to the adults around me was to be an object to gratify their lust of whatever kind that was, whether it was sexual or anger or some other thing that they had me there to do for them, which translated itself into I'm an object. I'm not a human. I'm not worth protecting, apparently, because my parents did not protect me from themselves or from other people. My peers tended to see me as a goody two shoes or teacher's pet. I think I still struggle with that a bit today, although I don't know, I haven't been called goody two shoes in quite some time. So, but my worth and my value, it's still in flux. However, my martial arts training has changed my perspective on whether or not I'm worth protecting. I had an encounter when I was training, and I was doing some grappling exercises with a male, and it was just a free form fighting and grappling session, and he had gotten on top of me. I was laying on my back, and he had me in a chokehold position, and I was fighting to get out of it, and not because I was scared, but because that's what we were told to do.
Right.
And I found myself trapped, and I could not get out of that. And so I started to tap out. I had an emotional reaction to that. At the time that was happening, I was not aware of triggers, but I was triggered by the experience, and so I actually left early that night because of the emotional overload that I was feeling, and I prayed about this, and I felt like God wanted me to go to a nearby Krav Maga instructor and do private lessons with him, do 3 private lessons with him, and somehow God was going to show me in those lessons something about value, because I realized from my experience with the grappling that I did not want to fight back. I was willing to just lay there and do whatever was required of me in that moment. Although the man that I was grappling with was not doing anything to me, but it reminded me enough of being in that position with other people as a child.
Yeah.
That the emotional overload came. It was triggered. So I went to a Krav Maga instructor. I explained to him why I was there, and he and I did some training, and we talked quite a bit. And at one point during one of the sessions, he said to me that I had to protect what God gave to me, which instantly changed my view on my own value.
Wow.
Because God values me enough to give me a body and a place on this earth, I also need to value it in the same way. As a Christian woman, it's important for me to believe God whenever he says things or does things like this. So I had to choose to believe that, which started me down a path to where I am not completely 100% there yet. However, I do believe in my value and my worth. And I do believe that I'm worth protecting at least enough to fight back.
Right.
So for myself, my value initially was communicated as you're an object, you're not worth protecting. But God has changed that for me to, yeah, of course you're worth protecting. I made you. You need to protect yourself. You need to protect other people. So that's my story. If either of you have, anything to add to that, feel free.
When I started doing self-defense training, and this was before I started taking the martial art, we were talking about these very things in class about being valuable and being worth protecting. And my whole life, up until my adult years, I never believed I had any value, except for what I could produce for other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I was taught that by my mother and stepfather in various ways through abuse, and by my mother and my biological father and his family. And then my stepfather would give me these really long lectures that didn't make any sense about how hard the world was and have to be a good employee and all this kind of stuff. And it didn't make any sense to me as a child. And it was completely confusing. Excuse me. It's completely confusing for me because I was basically being taught I was only there to serve whatever, through the abuse, whatever anger my mother was having. And then as I became an adult, I was only there to produce for other people.
Right.
It took the self-defense teaching for me to understand, first and foremost, that I am worth protecting, and not just physically. And then also, I do have more value than just those things. And I'm still learning myself about my own value and what that means. And I used to view people very differently in general. I was very cynical. And I still struggle with that sometimes. I just look at certain people and make judgments, and then I realize I'm reminded that they still have value in some way because they were created and they were put in this world for a reason. And it takes a lot of patience and understanding to look for the value in other people, because sometimes you can't see it, but it's there. It's just simply like by them existing, like you said, Stephanie, they have value. And for myself, I think believing for myself that I have value is still a struggle at times. I'll say, like, why do I even bother? Why do I even try? Sometimes things don't make sense. But then I'm reminded that because I too exist here and I have something to offer to the world, and I want to teach people how to protect themselves. That to me is very valuable. To have that ability to do that is important.
Right. And given what you've both been through, being able to get to a place where you see your value in spite of what you grew up with and what you endured, you really do have a lot to offer. I know that both of you have really spoken into my life and helped me see my own value. I know that as a child, I had mixed views about my value. I had almost died at birth, and then 3 years later. And I was seen as valuable, but also very fragile. And I believed I was fragile. And so I lived kind of a cocooned life for a long time. So I realized that I was very valuable to my parents. My parents would often tell me how glad they were that I survived, that they still had me, and they were very grateful for that. But on the other hand, I was given the very clear message that my worth lay in what I could do for the family. So I remember one time in particular, we were doing the whole house cleaning because we were having family come from Florida, and they were going to stay overnight. So all the bedrooms had to be cleaned, the bathrooms, everything, just dust, vacuum, scrub the toilets, everything. And I kept sitting down because I just wasn't feeling good. And my parents kept telling me, you need to help, stop being lazy. And I was like, I just don't feel good. I was probably about 11, I would say. And finally, my mom came over and took my temperature, kind of like to prove that I wasn't actually sick. And it was 102, and they sent me to bed. Um, but I would often be told, I was lazy if I slept in, that sort of thing. So I got this idea that if I could continue to be helpful, to do things, that would increase my value. If I got up early on a Saturday instead of sleeping in, if I was available anytime my dad wanted me to hold the other side of the board while he cut some planks with his saw, I would be more valuable. I think one of the biggest things that turned that idea around for me, it really started when my dad, who was a doer his whole life, had a stroke that completely took away his ability to produce. He had to quit his job, all of these things. And by the time it got to the end of his life, he was helpless. He could do nothing for himself. He couldn't even speak. But I remember looking at him and thinking, you are precious. You are so precious, Dad, just for living, just for being. And I just felt so much love for him. Just the fact that he was my dad. And I remember one night going home and thinking about that, and then thinking, what about me? Am I valuable just because I'm alive? Just because I'm me? Is that enough? And I thought, well, if it's enough for my dad, I think it could be enough for me. It still took me a while. I think I'm still getting there, little by little.
So it seems to me that value as a human is mostly transmitted to us from other people.
Yeah.
We assign value to each other. And then as we receive this information, we seem to absorb it in a way that makes it real. And then somehow gets into our spirit. And then we start to believe whatever it is we're told.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? So how do we go from that, from believing what we're told from an outside source, to changing what we think about ourselves? Right? Because ultimately, you valuing yourself comes from you believing whatever it is you believe about yourself. And a lot of people have trouble with that.
That's
true.
A
lot of people struggle to feel valuable to themselves. I think if more people felt valuable to themselves, they might stop some of the habits that we have that are destructive. They might change their lives in a way that makes it good. They might see the worth of themselves enough to motivate them to get out of whatever situation they're in. And obviously you can take that too far. You can value yourself so much that you completely obliterate any sort of real sense of belonging or being part of something greater than yourself. You could go totally the opposite direction. But I think most people just don't see their value. I was watching I forget what it was. It was one of those weird British shows about food. And I think they were interviewing people who had health problems because they were overweight. And this one woman said she had so many health problems. She had some sort of diabetic ulcer on her abdomen that just wasn't healing. She smoked. She ate whatever she wanted. She drank a lot of soda. And the host was coming into her life saying, you realize if you stopped drinking soda, you'd probably get better. And what she said was, well, it's basically just waiting around to die. She basically said, I'd rather just do all these things that I like and die happy. she was not motivated. She did not value her life enough to change anything that she was doing. She wanted to continue the smoking and soda and overeating and everything that. But what if she valued herself? Any thoughts on that? What if people who struggle to see themselves, what if they suddenly started seeing themselves in a different light? How do you get there?
Wow. You know, when I thought of that, I immediately thought of sacrifice and denial, self-denial for something better. Don't have that fully thought through yet, but the idea of, yeah, at first it would be very hard for her to stop drinking soda or to eat whatever she felt like eating. But maybe if she could just deny just a little bit, sacrifice a little bit.
Right.
Place.
But why would she make the sacrifice if she's not even like valuing herself? How can you get to valuing yourself to even start making that change? I think that's the key here, is how you think about yourself. Is your life worth anything to you?
Well, for myself, for a long time I didn't think it was, and I wasn't even conscious of that idea until recently, that I did not feel like I was valuable enough to change anything for the better. And how I'm learning to get there is to realize that I have value because of who I am as a person. I have things that I want to offer to the world, and I have things that I want to see in my life change for the better. And I think in terms of like health and things like that, people change because they value themselves more than their pleasures. You have to want to change because change is hard. It's very hard. Real change is very hard. And it's not that they don't want to change, they just don't want to do it what it takes to change. And a lot of people would rather just have their pleasures, what makes them happy, regardless of the circumstances, because they don't value themselves. So you really have to choose to value yourself over what you want in the moment.
I think that the choice thing, I think that's key. For me, I had to just choose to believe that I was valuable. Even if I didn't really believe it, I could choose to believe it because it was true. People that I trusted told me it was true. Other sources told me, you're valuable. Okay. I choose to believe I'm valuable. I think in a way it was sort of a leap of faith. Now I'm going to act like it's true. Because what I'm doing isn't working. What I'm doing, I think I was tending towards self-destruction. I have that tendency. So choosing to say, okay, I am valuable.
We're so glad you're here with us today. If you like our work and want to support our efforts, you can subscribe to our Patreon and receive exclusive content. We'll leave a link for you in our description.
So I think the idea that you're talking about, Evelyn, is coming into agreement with value.
Yeah.
It's believing that there's a reason you exist. If you weren't supposed to be here, you wouldn't be here. Now, if you're someone who believes in, you're just here because random genes got together and decided to make you, that's your business.
Right.
If you believe in a higher power, likely you also believe that the higher power has some say in your value. For myself, I believe in God, the Christian God, and he says I have value. So for myself, my belief in value comes from him. It doesn't really come from anywhere in me. And I actually need that external definition in order to get to the place you're talking about, Evelyn. Get to the place of, yes, I agree. Even if I don't feel it, I agree with it.
Right.
To where I can actually start to change things. Now, I don't know that you necessarily have to believe in God in order to get there, although it does help, in my opinion.
Right.
But if you believe that humans are born with value just for being human, just for being born, then if you can look at yourself with those eyes, you can begin to see that just by virtue of being here, you have value.
Yes.
So I want to go ahead and move the conversation to the next part, which is protection.
Yes.
Why do we protect what we value? Either of you can jump in.
I think of things like children, especially babies. People who are good parents love their babies because they created them and they're a part of them, and they just love them for who they are, and they don't have any expectations of them. And it's instinctual to protect them because they're helpless.
Right, but why do you protect what you value?
Because it's important to you.
Why?
Because it has a meaning in your life. It has, I'm going to say it has value.
Circular definitions?
It has a meaning to you. It means something to you. It's important to you. And you protect that and who are important to you. So whether human or object, if something is important to you, you will protect it.
Right, so like if you have money, now, I don't know. I've heard stories of people putting actual cash under their mattresses
Yeah.
because they don't trust the banks.
Yep.
Yeah.
In their minds, they're protecting what they value by
Right.
sticking it under the mattress. Other
Right.
people do put money in the bank, and that way they feel they're protecting their money. Because if you have cash on your person, it can be stolen,
Right.
right?
Right.
But if you have it somewhere safe, like a bank, supposedly safe. I mean,
Right.
we've all seen the movies and heard the news stories about banks getting robbed or whatever.
Right.
Right.
But the idea is that you're taking an action to protect something you value. So, for example, if I go to the grocery store, I don't leave all my groceries out in the front lawn. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
I value the money that I just spent on this food. I value the food because I need to eat. My family needs to eat. So I'm going to bring those bags of groceries into the house and I'm going to put them away
Right.
because I want to protect my purchases.
Right.
Right? And it's instinctual to protect your children. Your children represent the future. They represent family. They represent all sorts of things to different people over different cultures, right? So the meaning of protection has to do with the worth of the thing you're protecting.
Right.
So if we're going back to the whole concept of am I worth protecting, it has to start with your value. If you don't value yourself, you're probably not going to do what you need to do to protect yourself. Protecting yourself can look like all sorts of things. It can look like taking self-defense classes, taking martial arts classes, purchasing a gun, taking precautions to make sure that you're not in places you shouldn't be, learning some skills, interpersonal skills on how to deal with people who are being pushy and aggressive. It could look like all sorts of things.
Right.
It could look like not leaving your house ever, although that would be weird for me. 2020 was the example of why I would never become a recluse or a hermit. I could never do it.
Yeah.
It was a rough year for the entire world.
Indeed.
I cried a lot. I did not like being stuck in my house. So, at any rate, that was a little weird aside. I think we all have PTSD from 2020.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think that's something that the whole world has in common.
Collective trauma.
I was thinking about what does it mean to protect on a sort of like a visceral level. I was thinking of when I used to take my children to various parks in the area, and my son especially would immediately start to climb straight up, whatever it was. If he could climb it, he was going up. And we're talking, a 2-year-old climbing up, just straight up. And I remember just lunging, like to be under him just in case he fell. that is just instinctive. Yeah, that desire to protect. I'd mentioned my dad. I would stand up against any nurse or doctor who abused my dad in any way. There was a part of me that came out I didn't even know was there because he was helpless and we had to speak for him. We had to stand up for him. Mm-hmm. And, ultimately, it's not that hard for me to protect others. Even sisters, brothers, family especially, but children who are being bullied. I know what it's like to be bullied. And I would have that instinct to, even as an adult, want to stand between a child and another child and just say, this has to stop. I've stepped in when I've seen that no adult around was stepping in. It's that coming in and doing what I can to defend, being able to step in and help.
So, something that occurred to me while you were talking, Evelyn, was, I forgot.
I'm sure it'll come to you.
I hope so. I was thinking about protection and what sorts of things we're willing to do, how far we're willing to go.
Mm-hmm. Like putting ourselves out there.
Yeah, but I think I've forgotten what it was I wanted to say. That's okay.
Yeah.
So the question is, am I worth protecting? We're sitting here saying, well, yeah, of course, duh.
Well, yeah, at least in theory, right?
It's a good theory. Yeah, exactly. It's a good theory. But how much do we really believe, and what are we willing to do in order to protect ourselves? How far are you willing to take it?
Mm-hmm.
And, I don't know. I've talked to some people who sort of say, well, I would never take self-defense classes because nothing has ever happened, so therefore nothing ever will. And here in my town, that's not exactly true. We have all sorts of things happening on a frequent basis.
And you figure they may have thought the same thing.
Yeah. I have to decide that if I'm gonna do what the Krav Maga instructor told me, that I have to protect what God gave me, which is my body, my possessions, etc. I have to take action. Because that's ultimately what protection is. It's taking an action. Yeah. It's a decision to do something in order to stop a threat.
Right.
Right? And threats can look like all sorts of things. I mean, it could be a person who's literally threatening you. It could be, I don't know, an open pocketbook that the money can fall out of. It could be, your children climbing on things, like you said, Evelyn, that they shouldn't be climbing on. Mm-hmm. Protection is stopping something. So the question is, am I worth protecting, and how far am I willing to go to protect myself? What am I willing to do and not do, even?
Right.
There are laws against assault.
Right.
So, for example, if you find yourself in a situation and you're defending yourself, and just want to put it out there, there's a difference between getting into a bar fight and self-defense.
Right. We're not talking about a brawl here.
If you get into a bar fight and somebody hits you and you hit them back, that's not self-defense.
Right.
That's different. That's a fight.
Right.
Self-defense is when you are being approached by someone in a situation where you are going to be harmed in some way, or something is going to be taken from you, and you can't do anything about it, or without training, you especially can't do anything about it.
Right.
But someone is trying to harm you in some way, whether it's hurting you or taking something from you, like your car or your purse or whatever. You can respond to that with the same amount of force as is being given to you.
Right.
You can't take it any further than that, because then it becomes assault. However, now I'm not a lawyer, so please don't say Stephanie said.
Right.
Check your local laws, talk to your local police, whatever. What I am saying is there is a limit to what you're able to do.
Yes.
So, how far are you willing to go? Like, Evelyn, if you were out in public and some guy walks up to you and, I don't know, he threatens you in some way, what are you willing to do? Are you willing to protect yourself, and what are you willing to do?
There was a time when I I couldn't even imagine it. I think in some ways I was in a form of denial, like people have talked about. Well, nothing's happened yet. It's really hard for me to actually put myself into that position to begin with. And then thinking about it, my natural response is to freeze or to fawn. And so,
Same here.
yeah, so I think my training has helped me to start to think differently. So I think what would come up in me now is more like a righteous anger. Like, no, I'm not going to permit this. You need to back off. This isn't right, and I'm not going to do what you want me to do. You need to back off. My training has led me there. And even just practicing it, I just want to give one quick example. Back in 2019, when we had first started and we're working in a gym, and so it's huge gym, just picture like a school gymnasium. It was about that size. And what we were tasked to do was to grab this police baton, deploy it, so, open it up, raise it above our heads, and run and just yell, no! And I remember just standing there thinking, I don't know if I can do this. And then it was my time. I flicked that thing open, raised it above my head, and yelled. And I felt something shift inside. Where now, first of all, if my training is kicking in, I'm already becoming aware of this person approaching. So I'm already starting to look around, think about my options, but primarily just no. Whatever you want, you're not going to get, and I'm going to stop this, and I'm going to get away as quick as I can.
Rochelle, don't you have a couple of examples? Why don't you tell us one of the examples of a time where you felt the urge to protect yourself against a threat, perceived or otherwise?
It was during the day. I was in my car. I got turned around. I was trying to get somewhere else. And I was sitting in a parking lot and looking at my phone, looking at the GPS, trying to figure out where I was. And this man was coming up behind my car on the driver's side. And he waved at me like he wanted me to talk to him or roll my window down or something like that. And I had my doors locked. And thank God I did.
Which is part of your self-defense training,
Yes,
right?
absolutely, because I never would have thought to do that without training. Now, normally, I might have freaked out. I don't know what I would. I don't think I would have opened my door or let him in, but I would have freaked out. And if he had gotten the door open, I probably would have frozen before training. But with the training, I looked up. I saw him trying to approach. I saw him trying to open my door. And I just sped off. I just took off. I didn't care where I was going to go at that point. And I was shook up, but I didn't freak out. And a milder example of that is if a guy who's sketchy approaches me and wants to hit on me, I used to fawn automatically. I couldn't control it. And it was the most frustrating feeling in the world because in my mind, I'm like, what am I doing? Why am I acting like this?
Yeah.
And I had a fairly recent encounter with someone who was hitting on me at work, and I barely gave him any reaction. I think I even had a look of disgust on my face. I tried to keep my face blank, but I think the disgust came through a little bit because we didn't really exchange too many words, but his look changed on his face when he saw my face. And I didn't fawn. I didn't smile. I just finished the transaction. He went on his way.
So what motivated you in those two instances, especially the most recent one, to respond to those situations the way that you did? What triggered a sense of protection.
The first thing I think of is, how dare you?
Mm.
And, how dare you approach me that way in either example. And then the second thing is, I have control of myself now with my training, and that in and of itself, I lost my train of thought. Sorry.
Well, we're just falling off the tracks tonight, aren't we?
Yeah. What motivated me to protect myself was because I believe that I have value.
Mm.
That's bringing us back around.
There it is.
Even though our train keeps falling off the tracks, we've made it back around that mountain.
We got it back on.
We got back around to, because you have value and worth, you are worth protecting.
Yes.
Because you are you. There's no other reason. You don't need another reason. Because you exist, you have value, which makes you worth protecting.
So that goes far deeper than the whole idea of it being conveyed on you by other people or outside circumstances.
Right.
It's intrinsic.
It's intrinsic and has nothing to do with your talents, your looks, your possessions, the amount of money you have. That none of that makes any difference. The only thing that makes any difference is the fact that you're alive.
Well, that would be all of us.
For me, I believe that because I believe God created me, that I'm an image bearer of God, and that in and of itself makes me valuable.
Yes, it makes you valuable. If you believe in a God that created you, the fact that he created you makes you valuable. You bear his image. He made you. You're his child. A father wants to protect his children. And yeah, so I personally agree with that point of view myself. And like I said before in this podcast, the external definition helps me to get there. Yeah. I'm working on believing in my value as a human just for being here. That's taking time. It's taking effort. It's taking therapy.
Yes.
Right.
Lots and lots of therapy. But I believe I can get there.
Yes.
Meanwhile, I'm holding on to, the external definitions. I'm holding on to my position in my family's lives, my position in my friends' lives, believing in my value there too. It helps me to hold on. It helps me to keep moving. It helps me to keep reaching for that intrinsic value for myself, just being who I am. There's a lot to undo in my brain from my early life in order to get there. But it doesn't mean I don't believe it. It just means that I'm not quite there yet totally.
Right.
I'd say I'm about 75% there, which is good.
That is good.
But there's still 25% more to go.
Yeah.
For me.
I have a hard time with positive compliments or feedback from people. I realized that today. Every time someone I got a lot of compliments at work today for a job well done, for mastering a difficult section of the store. And I struggle with that. I feel embarrassed by it. I struggle with my therapist giving me compliments and being positive. It's very personal because that's really where my value struggle is believing that these things are actually true about me as a person. And yes, job performance is valuable to your employer, obviously. It is valuable to me as well. I try to be a hard worker. But just like the progress thing with my therapist is difficult to accept at times.
Yeah, I think that valuing yourself has so many intricate things that are tied together that make it hard to feel valuable, like you were talking about, Rochelle. So anyway, we want to thank you for being here with us on this podcast in our first episode ever. I mean, we have the welcome episode, but it's not a true, quote, true, I'm doing air quotes with my fingers right now, episode. So hopefully you enjoyed this, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks for joining us today on this podcast episode. We hope you have a better understanding of your own value and worth as a human, and how that leads to wanting to take action and protect yourself and those around you from harm. We hope you have a great day and look forward to you joining us again at the Mama Bear Initiative.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thanks so much for joining us as we discussed such an important topic. We hope you got some food for thought and encouragement to keep going and keep growing. See you later, Bear Club.
Remember to join the Bear Club on our Patreon page for exclusive content. The link is in the description. You can find our podcast on Google, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts.